Hi there, it's Kevin with the Rogue Market. We are getting close to Duskmourn being released, so that means it's the perfect time to go back and look at cards from Bloomburrow that have the potential of going up because supply is basically as high as it's going to get. There aren't going to be any more drafts for Bloomburrow. Events are going to start focusing on Duskmourn, and then people are going to start cracking packs and collector's packs and whatnot from Duskmourn. So this is the typical time that you're going to see the lowest prices for these cards. And then over the next few years, since Bloomburrow still has a long time left in Standard, these cards should be going up. So I tried to pick a mix of Commander cards and Standard cards and looked at a lot of the TCG player data for these cards and came up with a list of the cards I like the most. Now, Bloomburrow is a set that's opened a lot compared to Outlaws of Thunder Junction, and even things like Phyrexian will be one. I would say that this probably comparative to something like Ixalan as far as how many packs have been opened for this set. It's just been phenomenal sales for Bloomburrow. So keep that in mind. Typically speaking, though, these cards are going to have a harder time than sets that are just ignored. I should do a whole recap of like Murders of Karlov Manor when we have $20 rares, which is just insanity in a standard-based set. So anyway, without further ado, let's get to the top 10 list of cards that I think are good buys right now from Bloomburrow. So if we start off Fable Passage. So this one is just kind of on my 10 because this has a lot of supply. It was in a core set as well as it was in original Wilds of Eldraine, right? So this is like its what, third or fourth printing, but it is incredibly cheap right now. I think it's like $3 for Fable Passage. So this is kind of honorable mention, lowest on my list. I guess not honorable mention, it is my top 10 or my 10th on this list, as I think it's just a good time to get in Fable Passage. This probably will go back up to the $4, $5, $6 range, and then buy lists will be very aggressive because this card just sees a ton of play in Commander. It will see play in many, many standard decks. Lots of standard decks put in one to four ofs. There are even some combo decks right now that use landfall in standard. So Fable Passage, I think, is just a great time to get in on this card. So on to my next card is going to be Weardown and / Long River's Pull. These are both very comparable cards. So why I like these, and again, this is my 9th on the list because they're uncommons. But if you go back and look at sets, even things like Wilds of Eldraine has like a $4 uncommon now. Weardown and Long River's Pull have phenomenal TCG player sales right now for how many are sold per day. So you have about 35 copies. So 3,000 were sold since the start of Bloomburrow. Yes, there is a ton left for this card, 3,772. But these are the type of cards that just sneak up because all these sellers just list these as basically just a bulk uncommon. So they don't really do their due diligence of researching these type of cards. They just throw them all up there. And I mean, it's selling for a bulk uncommon. This is not a bulk uncommon. This is a uncommon that is going to see a ton of play. In fact, these two uncommons, Long River's Pull and Weardown, are considered, I think, top 5 according to EDH Rec for uncommons played out of Bloomburrow. And then they're in 3% of all decks are running these that are eligible to run these in Commander. So when you see a card like these two, I think that they're going to be $1, $2, no problem. Buy lists will probably buy list them for 50 cents within like a year when the supply starts getting short of these cards. These are the cards that, like I mentioned, they just sneak up on you. And they're great to pick out of bulk. They're great if you can find deals on them. And again, it's not the greatest little thing. Okay, I'm selling a card for 50 cents. This stuff, I've sold $100 packages and more out of just cards like this that I picked up out of bulk and picked up off of. Sometimes you can find a seller selling like 50 of them for 15 cents, and then within a year you just sell it right back to buy lists on TCG Player, or sell it right back to a place like Card Kingdom that will eventually need these suckers because they are, like I said, in 3% of all EDH decks. So really, really liking this. You can see that very comparable, 35, 34 copies of Long River's Pull and the Weardown, so that is why I'm putting them in the same category for my number 9. On to my number 8. Number 8 is going to be Egra, Eater of All. This would be higher on my list, except this card's already quite expensive. I think it's the most expensive card in the set, if I am not mistaken. So this card is seeing play everywhere. It is seeing play in Commander as a Commander, and it's seeing play in many other decks that utilize food or utilizing sacrificing things. Egra also sees play in Pioneer. So if you can get a card that sees play in a top tier Pioneer deck and has a lot of pressure from the Commander format, I think it's going to be a card that will go up in price. And we've seen mythics like Shielded go all the way up to $75-100. We see mythics that are comparably on the same kind of par level of seeing playing Pioneer and Commander. They're typically $25-30 out the door within like a year or two. And this has solidified its spot. I mean, it knocked out us a few other cards that were in the Jund Sacrifice deck, so it's got to be powerful enough. And I believe they're running quite a few copies. Let's just take a look at the Jund Sacrifice, and 2 copies in this one. I think I saw some that were running more than 2 copies. 3 copies in this Jund Food. So of course that's great for a Mythic. This sees playing Pioneer. You see the Pioneer RCQ season will come back, and Food is one of the top decks, or Sacrifice is one of the top decks right now in Jund. We look at the sales data, still pretty good sales data, 24 sold per day, only 219 left on TCU Player. So again, I think this is definitely, of course you could have gone in this card a lot earlier and would have made a lot more. However, I still think right now is a great time to get in on this card. On to my number 7. My number 7 is going to be Luma. So I'm going to pick another Mythic here. There's a new deck this week that is utilizing 4. I guess it's not really new. People have been testing. I even ran a version of this for a while that are trying to do a Splendid Reclamation type deck that we saw that rotated out when the lands. Well, Splendid Reclamation rotated, as well as the lands for New Capenna rotated out, and that deck basically stopped existing. However, people have built a new version of this deck that do run 4 copies of Luma. And you can see this is also being played in like Amulet Titan. He's playing a ton of Commander decks. And the Golgari land combo is the deck that I want to show that does run 4 Luma Belle of the Woods. And it had a good finish in one of the standard challenges. It took 5th place in one of the standard challenges. It consistently puts up really good results, like 15th place here, 6-0 here. And it's utilizing the Aftermath Analyst and the Nisa Resurgent Animus, and they're just basically trying to get a lot of value of lands coming back into play. So the Golgari land combo is pretty well positioned, I would say, in the meta. But regardless of that, Luma just sees a ton of play in lots of commanders. I've been scrolling through many different green commanders that run this. It works great with like even fetch lands, just getting 1 fetch land back, and even just its ETB trigger of milling 4 cards and returning lands. I mean, right there is a pretty decent little ramp card. So Luma is pretty underpriced at the moment. You can see that 7 are sold per day. There's only 382 left in the total quantity available, and 671 is sold. So it's really good pricing, and we're still about the lowest this card has been. You could have got in slightly cheaper, but I think now with the decks starting to put up a lot more high results, especially that last standard challenge, I think that this card is poised to go up in price. All right, on to my number 6. My number 6 is going to be the Iridescent Vine Lasher. Again, this card would be higher up on my list, but the price is already $4. And $4 is actually a lot for a rare from this set. Like I said earlier, this is a set that's been opened a lot, so you can't compare it to Outlaws of Thunder Junction or Murders of Karlov Manor. There's just a lot more supply of these particular cards out. However, Iridescent Vine Lasher is everywhere right now. And when I say everywhere, it is in Standard, it is in Pioneer, it is in Modern, it is in Commander. And this card just gets better and better and better with any sort of lands that go to the graveyard, the ETB. The Offspring's really cool on this card. So it just works with Assassins, with Assassin's Creed that just came out. Lizards, this card is everything you want in a card. Very, very cheap right now comparatively to how many cards are selling. If you go over 15 are sold per day, 1,335 have been sold with a current quantity of 886 left for the Vine Lasher. The only thing I don't like is the price point with it. Like I said, it's pretty expensive comparatively to some of the other rares I'm going to pick. That's why it's kind of lower on my list. On to my number 5. My number 5 is Season of Gathering. This is a pure EDH spec. This is one of the most played mythics from the set, and it actually has a very low price point. So basically, destroying artifacts and enchantments is something you want to be doing in EDH. You can actually hit 3 of them with this card, or 2, right? No, you can hit 3, right? Because I choose 5 worth modes of this. Okay, never mind. Yeah, you can hit 2 and then actually put a +1 counter on something. But these cards that also let you draw cards, you could look great as Power Moon Cruiser Control. casual players love these type of cards. So Season of Gathering, according to EDH Rec, goes in 3% of all eligible decks. It's already in 9,114 listed decks on EDH Rec. And if we go over and check out the TCG, 20 sell per day, and there's only 612 of them left. So that's a month, and these will be evaporated. Of course, there will be new listings, but it only has a month's worth of supply on TCG Player. So really liking this one for my Mythic spec of the lot. On to my number 4. My number 4 is the Thorn Forager. Now this one is basically, it was the first card that I saw that was near bulk dollar range on TCG Player that actually has a ton of sales. And when I say a ton of sales, look how many of these suckers sell per day. 36 of them sell per day. I mean, that is higher than most of the cards we've looked at. And it is going for, 50 cents here. It's all over the place for the near bulk price for rares. I mean, a little bit above, of course. But I believe it was, I look at Card Kingdom was buying a ton of them. That's always a good sign of them. And if you actually look at the specs of this card, it's typical for a 2-drop that adds mana, but foraging to add 2 mana of any colors. This could go in many food-based decks, any self-mill based strategy to ramp out your 4-drop. I could actually see this card seeing standard play with like a turn 1 card that even Pioneer kind of is interesting with like a Gilded Goose, and then a Thornvault Forager. They don't do anything for Forager. You can sack the food and actually add 2 mana the next turn. I mean, you could do that with Goose too, I would say, but typically Goose gets bolted or whatever. And then the Search Your Library for a Squirrel card. This is probably what's putting it over the top because Squirrel decks are everywhere at the moment. Everyone's building Chatterfang. It's one of the most played commanders right now. And the Thornvault Forager is going in basically every one of those decks. So that is why I like this card, mainly due to the fact that, look at this, 3,296 sold, 36 per day, and it doesn't seem to be slowing down. On to my number 3. My number 3 is the Manifold Mouse. Now, this one I just want to compare. It's starting to see a lot more play in the Gruul Prowess, as well as there's a Boros Mouse deck. There's Mono Red Aggro. And if we look at the stats for this card, it is seeing play in Pioneer, does see play in plenty of Commander decks, and Boros Heroic, like, people are realizing how good this card synergizes with a lot of cards that came out of Bloomburrow. Just if you target them, they're both white cards and red cards. If you target them with an ability, then they trigger. And this is an easy way to do that, as well as there's a huge upside to the mouse with giving double strike or trample. Both the heroic decks and just the straight out aggro decks, they love those two abilities because there's a lot of monstrous rages going on. There's a lot of other pump spells. And the double strike and trample is super, super, super relevant in those type of shells. So this was like 1-ofs in a lot of decks right now. I've seen as many as 4-ofs in decks. I think if we take a look at some of the decks here with Gruul Prowess, it at first did not see a lot of play in Gruul Prowess, and this version that just took 7 and 2 is running a full playset of them. So it's starting to even outclass things like the Slick Shot Show Off, which was, the whole reason to be running a lot of these prowess-based strategies. And people have realized that just how nuts the double strike on this dude can be on turn 3 with like a Swiftspear or a Heartfire hero that are already out. And the main reason I want to draw attention to the Manifold Mouse here is you can see right here that the Emberheart Challenger, which basically goes in the same deck as a 4-of, is $16 for a playset. Manifold Mouse is $4 for a playset. So these two are almost mirrored in how many versions of decks they're seeing play in, and one of them is 4 times more expensive. So something's got to give. Either the Challenger has to go down, maybe it's overvalued, or the mouse goes back up. And in my opinion, the mouse is going to catch up to the Challenger. I'm not sure if this guy is in the kits, the starter kits. It could be. There could be some places where I don't know that could be driving the price down of this mouse. But the amount of play this mouse is seeing, it's going to go up. I really, really like this card for my number 3. On to my number 2. This is the Valley Rock Caller. I talked about this card in my Market Monday channel. This is just catnip to casuals. It is seeing just an absolute crazy amount of sales on TCG Player, 1,166 over the past month, and there's only 738 of them left. And it is one of the most played rares out of Bloomburrow, according to EDHREC. And what I like most about it is it's got more synergy than just being a squirrel. Any lizard, rat, bat, squirrel in the future commander that it wants to be tribal, they might want to put this Valley Rock Collar in there. It's also not bad in like life gain strategies. I typically don't think it's the best card, but I'm not a casual player. I'm not in a casual player's mind. Whatever turns in a casual player's mind, they really love this card. I guess squirrels do really go wide. I mean, I don't think this is going to see any play in standard anytime soon because there's just better effects. It might be surprising. There could be some sort of squirrel deck that sneaks through that does want to put down a Valley Rock Collar, survive shock, I guess. It's a little bit harder to kill than some of the other cards. I mean, Cut Down's still a huge card. So I wouldn't bank on Standard, Pioneer, Modern ever have anything to do with this card. This is just a casual friendly card that has a lot of sales, which I think is very undervalued right now for the price. And as I said on my Rogue Market channel, the main reason I'm picking this one is if you go over to Card Kingdom, they are buying tons of these at a very, very low spread compared to what they're being sold on TCG Player. So whenever I find a card like that, I think it's just the perfect duck card to go in on. Alrighty, so on to my number one card. This is going to be the Bezza the Bounding Spring. This is what I call White Shieldred. It is basically pushing out every 4-drop in every format, even Planeswalkers. So your 4-drop a lot of times in control, mid-range, and I've even seen this in tempo-based strategies, is going to be Bezza. This card just does everything. It's a 4/5 for 4 mana, gaining life to stabilize versus aggro, and even creating fish tokens as chump blockers. If your opponent has more cards than you do, you draw. It does just creates a treasure token that becomes super relevant. Like the domain decks are running that. They're like, oh you actually have more lands right now. Okay, I'll create a treasure token. It ramps out my Atraxa. Again, this card just does everything. It's in sideboards everywhere. If you go look down on Pioneer, it's in plenty of sideboards, and I think it's going to be picked up even in more sideboards. And in standards all over the place in domain decks and the Orzhov mid-range decks. The Boros token controlled shell that comes in every now and again. And Bezza keeps seeing more and more copies, like 4 ofs, 3 ofs, 2 ofs, lots of sideboard cards. I believe you do go over to the most played cards. Let's do it here with most played cards in standard. Now, if I can remember how to find it on Goldfish. Most popular cards in standard. I thought it did, yeah. So this is the second most played creature in standard right now is Bezza the Bounding Spring. And so what I like most about Bezza, the price point is still find copies for around $10. This card is seeing too much play to be a $10 mythic. This sees upwards of, what did it say, 2.7 to 2.7 average deck that plays it in 25% of all decks. That is way higher. I mean, actually, that's right on par with Shieldred. Yes, I admit Shieldred sees a ton more commander play, but I wouldn't discount Bezza. I bet Bezza sees a ton of commander play as well, just for how relevant even the treasure token, just with one of your opponents having more. You get 2 creatures, you get life, you get cards. It's a very good blinkable card. Yeah, I'm sure plenty of commander decks actually do run it as a copy. It actually makes a top 10 list of just cards overall in standard. So yeah, that's just a duck card. That's a duck card. It's the right time right now to get into Bezza. So there you have it. There is my list. I guess, well, before I guess we can show the sales data too, which is awesome. 8 sell per day, 494 left. Yeah, I think Bezza's great. Anyway, there is my top 10 cards that I think are great buys from Bloomburrow. I will be getting back to doing the daily delve. I thought I'd just crush a bunch of these cards right now in just a full video rather than piecemealing them one after another for daily delves. But I will be doing some analysis every day on a card and try to pick a card for the daily delve of cards that I think are going to go up. So we'll be taking a look at Duskmourn too in the few days to see if there's any sleepers from that set. But until then, this has been Kevin with the Rogue Market. Thanks for watching.